Girivaradhari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Yashodanandana Vrajachanarandana. Yashodanandana Vrajachanarandana. Yamuna Vanachari, Yamuna Tira Vanachari, Yamuna Tira Vanachari, Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Komm schon bitte. Komm schon. Kurz. Die Medaille. So again, a warm welcome to all of you, but especially also to our two guests. What's your name?
Jan.
Jan, and especially Linda, who is a student from ZW. So maybe you can introduce yourself just briefly, because we don't have so many newcomers on Friday morning. Usually on Sunday we have many. So please, you can explain who you are and why you are here today.
Yes, of course. Yes. So nice to meet you all. My name is Linda. I'm from Zurich and I'm an interviewer and I'm studying journalism. And once I was sitting at the lake in Zurich, and then some people here distributed me a flyer and gave me some cookies, and so this is how I got to know about you. And then I wanted to visit the temple on Sunday, this arrangement that you have on Sundays. And for school we have to write a reportage, like experiencing something and then letting other people know how we experienced it. And this is why I'm here. And so I hope you don't feel too like I'm watching you. But I'm really happy to be here and I'm excited to see what you're going to do.
We are behaving the best way today because you're here. And actually I want to do it a little bit more basic. Today's lecture, just also for you.
Thank you. That's
and actually, sometimes we who are here all the time, we get bored hearing the same things again and again, but it's necessary because our process is Shravanam, Kirtanam, meaning hearing and chanting, and that's how the consciousness gets changed. So our process is not so much about improving externals, but more about improving our consciousness, our heart. And so that's just done by constantly hearing. We say Nityang Bhagavata Sevaya, Bhagavat, Srimad Bhagavatam. What you ask to come today to listen. Nityang, we do that regularly, daily actually. So every day we have a class here. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 We are continuing reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto number 4, chapter 28, and today we recite text 37. Shita Ushna Vata Varshani Kshut Pipase Priya Apriye Sukha Dukhe Iti Dvandvani Ajayat Samadarshanaha Shitoshna Vata Varshani Shitoshna Vata Varshani Kshutpipase Priya Priye Kshutpipase Priya Priye Sukha Dukhe Iti Dvandva Sukha Dukhe Iti Dvandvani Sukha Dukhe Iti Dvandvani Ajayat Samadarshanaha Ajayat Samadarshanaha Shitoshna Vata Varshani Kshutpipase Priya Priye Sukha Dukhe Iti Dvandvani Ajayat Samadarshanaha Matajis.
Shitoshna Vata Varshani
Shitoshna Vata Varshani
Vipase Priya Priya
Vipase Priya Priya
Sukha Dukheti Dvandvani
Dukheti Nandani
Ajayat Samadarshanaha
Ajayat Samadashana Shitoshavata Vashani
Shitoshavata Vashani
Vipase Priya Priya
Vipase Priya Priya
Sukha Dukheti Nandani
Sukha Dukheti Dvandvani
Ajayat Samadarshana
Ajayat Samadarshanaha.
Shita, cold. So basically, what we do is we first recite the verse in Sanskrit, and then we do word for word translation, and then we do translation, and then we have a purport by Srila Prabhupada. He translated all of the books, and that's how we go through. Shita, cold. Ushna, heat. Vata, wind. Varshani, and rainy seasons. Kshut, hunger. Pipase, and thirst. Priya, pleasant. Apriye, and unpleasant. Sukha, happiness. Dukhe, and distress. Iti, thus. Dvandani, dualities. Ajayat, he conquered. Samadarshanaha, equipoised. Translation. Through austerity, King Malayadvaj, in body and mind, gradually became equal to the dualities of cold and heat, happiness and distress, wind and rain, hunger and thirst, the pleasant and the unpleasant. In this way he conquered all relativities. Please repeat. Through austerities. Through austerity. King Malayadvaj, in body and mind, gradually became equal to the dualities of cold and heat, happiness and distress, wind and rain, hunger and thirst, the pleasant and the unpleasant. In this way he conquered all relativities. Purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. Liberation means becoming free from the relativities of the world. Unless one is self-realized, he has to undergo the dual struggle of the relative world. In Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna advises Arjuna to conquer all relativities through tolerance. Lord Krishna points out that it is the relativities like winter and summer that give us trouble in the material world. In the winter we do not like taking a bath, but in the summer we wish to take a bath twice, thrice or more a day. Thus Krishna advises us not to be disturbed by such relativities and dualities when they come and go. The common man has to undergo many austerity to become equipoised before dualities. One who becomes agitated by the relativities of life has accepted a relative position and must therefore undergo the austerities prescribed in the Shastras, the scriptures, to transcend the material body and put an end to material existence. King Malayadvaj underwent severe austerities by leaving his home. going to Kulachal, taking his bath in the sacred rivers, and eating only vegetables like stems, roots, seeds, flowers and leaves, avoiding any cooked food or grains. These are very, very austere practices. In this age, it is very difficult to leave home and go to the forest or the Himalayas to adopt the processes of austerity. Indeed, it is almost impossible. If one is even advised to give up meat eating, drinking, gambling, and illicit sex, one will fail to do so. What then would a person do if he went to the Himalayas or Kulachala? Such acts of renunciation are not possible in this age. Therefore, Lord Krishna has advised us to accept the Bhakti Yoga process. Bhakti Yoga will automatically liberate a person from the dualities of life. In Bhakti Yoga, Krishna is the center and Krishna is always transcendental. Thus, in order to transcend dualities, one must always engage in the service of the Lord, as confirmed by Bhagavad Gita 14:26. Mam cha yogya vicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samatityaitan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. One who engages in full devotional service, who does not fall down in any circumstance, at once transcends the modes of material nature and thus comes to the level of Brahman. If one is factually engaged in the service of the Lord, Bhakti Yoga, he will automatically control his senses, his tongue, and so many other things. Once engaged in the Bhakti Yoga process, with all sincerity, one will have no chance of falling down. Even if one falls down, there is no loss. One's devotional activities may be stunned or choked for the time being, but as soon as there is another chance, the practitioner begins from the point where he left off. And before we start the class, we also recite some prayers, so those of you who know the prayers, please chant along. Om Ajnana-timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurum militam yena tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Tadati Swapadamtikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavangscha Sri Rupam Saprajatam Sahagana Raghunatang Vitang Tvan Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Sri Vishakam Vitangscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Prachani Nirvishesha Shunyavani Pasyatya Desha Tarini one more time the translation. Through austerity, King Malayadvaj in body and mind gradually became equal to the dualities of cold and heat, happiness and distress, wind and rain, hunger and thirst, the pleasant and the unpleasant. In this way he conquered all relativities. So Hare Krishna. Thank you all for coming. So when we study the books of Srila Prabhupada, we often hear about the absolute truth. You have read some of Srila Prabhupada's books? Not yet. Not yet. Good. That means you will. Absolute truth, he's often speaking about the search for the absolute truth. And in the beginning, that might sound a little bit foreign. The absolute truth, what does it mean? And of course we understand by studying his books, he is actually speaking about God. And not only does he say God, but he often says the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That's even more foreign, more strange. We never heard such a term, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Often, before we come in touch with Srila Prabhupada's books, we don't think so much about the reality and the nature of reality. But some of us, we come in touch with Srila Prabhupada, and often because we start to question our life and this world. Often because we are suffering. And then one point is made, which we actually hear in this verse, that we are suffering because of duality. Duality, is it clear to everyone what duality means?
Yes.
You want to explain briefly what duality means?
It's rule in the natural world. It's a polarity, it's imbalance, and when this balance will be destroyed, Kali, it will become duality.
So you speak about the material world and
Yes,
about polarity.
just about the natural world.
And if there is an imbalance.
Yes.
Okay. So relativity and duality, they are connected. And duality, the word in Sanskrit is dvandvani, which means dvandvani, which means two. No, you have two. Duality means to have two. And it's a very important term in the Vedic philosophy. Actually, almost all the serious philosophies in the Vedic culture, they have some kind of connection to the word Dvaita or Advaita. So it always speaks about either oneness or duality. And then sometimes it's Dvaita, Dvaita, duality and oneness, and actually we follow that line. So duality in itself means that there is two things. And absolute means that there is one thing. Absolute means something which encircles everything, which includes everything. And we, when we don't hear from the Vedic scriptures, we don't know about the absolute nature. We might know about it from some other religion, we get some idea, but a very deep understanding is found in the Vedic scriptures. And so duality comes from relativity, which is basically the opposite of absolute. So absolute means that there is one, and relativity means that there is not one, everything is relative. So there is no central point, but everything is just relative to each other. But there is no core point. But absolute means actually there is a core point to which everything is connected to. And the absolute truth is what Prabhupada describes the Supreme Personality of Godhead, God Himself. Krishna. Yes, so that's a little bit the philosophical, what we are talking about here. And we can understand from this verse that actually spiritual life means to get free from the dualities. And again for Linda, sorry I just had a blackout. We want to quickly say, you know, this is actually a story and what is happening. So basically it's a story of a person, a king, who was active in this world, and then at the time of death, when he died, the soul, which is in the body, went to a body of a woman. Because of karma and reincarnation, he took a female body. And now we hear how the husband of that woman, King Malayadvaj, after performing his duties as a king, at the end of life he goes to the forest. And why does somebody go to the forest? In Vedic culture it's very standard that when one retires, one goes to the forest. And exactly for that purpose, to become free from dualities. And in Srimad Bhagavatam we hear many stories about people going to the forest. Does anyone remember some other stories? Bharat Maharaj, very nice. I will talk a little bit about him. Kapila Muni. Yes. I don't remember exactly how he goes, but Dhritarashtra going to the forest, the Pandavas going to the forest, even Krishna going to the forest. Dhruva Maharaj. Dhruva Maharaj is of course special because he's going to the forest when he's very young. Usually they go when they are old. So that is a very standard practice, yes?
What is the meaning of the forest, the symbol in the Vedic?
Sorry? Actually the word forest is vana, which means forest, and it can have different symbolic meanings. So this world is called vana in itself. Nirvana means to get free from. Or the Vrindavan. It's another one. Yeah. So again, back to the point. It's a very standard practice to get free from duality. They, at the end of life, they go to the forest and they perform austerities in order to get free from this duality, happiness and distress. And I just want to give a philosophical background a little more, because it's really an important topic for all of us to understand how is it that we experience duality. And in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna, he explains how this happens. He says, Matra sparshas tu konteya shitoshna sukha dukkha daha agama paina nityas dangstitikshasa bharata. O son of Kunti, the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress and their disappearance in due course are like the appearance and disappearance of winter and summer seasons. They arise from sense perception. O sign of Bharat, one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. Sukha dukkha, we also heard that in that verse. Sukha means happiness and dukkha means unhappiness. And Krishna is saying that they are only created by sense perception, meaning when our senses perceive something. And I want to ask you, when you look back, what's the something you remember when you felt really happy. Maybe you can give some example in your life where you felt really happy.
Ecstatic, no time feeling.
Ecstatic, no
Brightness.
time feeling.
It's ecstatic, joy, Freude.
No time feeling.
No time feeling.
Okay, that's a bad example. I need something else. You are too elevated for us.
Sorry.
Yes, Yamuna.
As a kid, I often felt like very much joy about simple things when we were family. I don't know where I wasn't like. It's much easier to become very happy and excited about something as a child.
As a child. So when you would do something, go somewhere. So basically when you have some experience, you go to a new place, you see new things, you are with your family, you talk to them. So basically it's some sense perception. Maybe I should ask in a different way. Can you think of happiness and distress that has not been connected to your senses? Can you give an example where you felt happy but it was not connected to your sense perception? Silence. So it obviously means Krishna is right, that you can only get some feeling of happiness, distress by either seeing something or... Okay, sometimes we have something in the mind, but if we analyze, it is also some experience we got previously. So we're just remembering that, or sometimes we're speculating. I'm imagining I'm becoming the king of the whole world and everybody will bow down to me. So mainly my senses are subtly working. So that's an important point to understand, that our senses, they actually create happiness and distress, dukkha and sukha. And Krishna is saying here that actually you should tolerate that. You should not strive to have more sense gratification which give you happiness, and not strive to eliminate the unhappiness due to sense perception, but you should tolerate. And in today's world, if we look, this concept, this idea is not understood at all. In the modern world, humanity tries to eliminate every kind of dukkha whenever it comes. I'm speaking generally here. Whenever there is some unhappiness, they try to eliminate it immediately, and whenever they have a desire for sukha, they will try to achieve it. And I was reflecting a little bit, how do we actually perceive that this is so? And few things that we see in today's world came to my mind. One thing is that if you compare today's world to maybe just 50 years ago, nowadays the shops where you can buy things, they are open for a long time, 7 days a week. Sometimes you have 24-hour stores, and what else you have? You have online shopping. You can wake up 2 o'clock in the morning and think, oh, I just want to buy the thing, and go online and buy it. And then the delivery system, I was actually, this year or last year, I was amazed when I understood how Amazon Prime started to operate. I think they really improved how quick they bring the things to you. So if you have Amazon Prime membership, then you can order today, sometimes it can come on the same day, at least the next day you will have it. What does it mean? That I cannot tolerate. I cannot tolerate to wait until I get happiness by having a new television or whatever. So that's one way. Another thing how we see is see how a lot movement is going on, how people travel compared to 100 years ago, or let's say 200 years ago. We have cars, we have planes, and the newest thing, we have the scooter. Our dear Dino, he is one of the scooter drivers in Zurich city. So many ways how you can move around, meaning, okay, I'm in one place, but I like to be there and do this, so I have to quickly move. That's one symptom that people cannot tolerate. They find newer and newer ways how can they move from one way to the other just to get some sense experience, something. Another way how we see this in relationships, that previously it was standard that people, if they want to have a conjugal relationship, they get married and then they stay together the whole life. But nowadays it's actually very rare. Why? Because if you get married and you commit to one person, you're actually sacrificing a lot of sense gratification. So in order to facilitate that, nowadays people, they break up all the time. Sometimes they have multiple relationships, and we have to say it's a very successful strategy in achieving that goal of feeling sense happiness, sukha and dukkha, and eliminating dukkha. Meaning today's world is very good, modern society is very good in that. But, now comes the but. And Krishna, in another verse, he explains why this is a problem. I'm quoting often the same verses again and again because they are touching me so deeply. And again, because Linda is here, I'm making it simple. Krishna says, Yehi sang sparsha ja bhoga. Again, the same word sparsha. Before we had matra sparshas. Now he says, Yehi sang sparsha ja bhoga, dukkha yonaya evate. And dukkha also, we heard before. Adyantavanta konteya na te shuramate buddha. An intelligent person does not take part in the sources of misery which are due to contact with the material senses. O son of Kunti, such pleasures have a beginning and an end, and so the wise man does not delight in them. So even though in today's society, people, they possess a lot, they have a lot of experience of sense gratification, different kinds, but what do we actually see? Yes?
The depression rate is rising.
The depression rate is rising. That's something which also scientifically is proven.
Yes, it's I had a very nice conversation yesterday with a student of psychology, and he said that that's the biggest problem, that these rates are rising very badly actually.
So psychology student who is studying at University of Zurich, meaning an academic person who should be respected, is saying that the biggest problem humanity is facing is depression. Of course, there's many problems, but
yeah, maybe on the psychological level.
On a psychological level. So that means that people are not happy. On the other hand, they have a lot. Never was it so easy to travel. Never was it so easy to get new things. Never was it so easy to have sexual relationships. It was never that easy. But on the other hand, we see people are most depressed. So depression is one thing, but then we also see all kinds of other symptoms which actually show that people are not happy. For example, drug abuse. There has probably never been a time where people have used so many intoxicants, alcohol, cigarettes, marijuana, medication, pills. And why do the people take this? Because I'm not feeling so nice, so I have to take something to change my consciousness. So that's the underlying principle, that people, they look for this happiness which is based on the sparsha, the touch of the senses with the sense objects. However, Krishna is saying it will give you unhappiness. And why? Because it has a beginning and an end. You're eating something nice now, but at one point it will be you eating too much, and then you have to stop because you're overeating. So that's why this advice of Krishna that we should tolerate is very relevant. We should learn to tolerate. But then we might wonder, that's so pessimistic. No. I tried to be happy in this world, and now Krishna is saying, actually, if you try to be happy in this world, you're bound to become unhappy due to this. And we find information in the Vedic scriptures that there is a happiness, but it is different to material happiness. We heard that material happiness means sukha, and it basically means, sukha means if I feel that my surrounding is very nice. Again, I see something nice, I hear something nice, I smell something nice, I touch something nice. That means sukha, that the surrounding is pleasant. But there is another kind of happiness, and this is ananda. And I actually said I would like to speak about Bharat, so I almost forgot. Bharat, he is a very good example of a person who showed how powerful this ananda is. So Bharat is an interesting point, maybe also for newcomers. Bharat Maharaj is the person who India was named after, right? So those who are from India, we know India as India, but actually if you go to India, it's called Bharatvarsha.
Mahabharat?
Mahabharat is a book. And why? Because this king Bharat, it's also in the Srimad Bhagavatam, this story, he was very pious, and so they named the whole country after him. And this King Bharat, he exactly did the same thing. After he was ruling the kingdom, he went out in the forest to renounce. And he was a very advanced spiritual person, but somehow or other he got attached to an animal, a deer, Zrei. And at the time of death, he was remembering the deer because he was so affectionate, and then he took birth again as a deer. But the one thing was special because he could remember his previous life. He didn't forget that in his previous life he was practicing spirituality and who he was. So he was worshipping God even as a deer. And then he took birth again as Chadabharat. And he was a very elevated soul, but in this lifetime he decided that he will keep himself undercover and behave like a madman, a dumb person, so that he can just focus on self-realization, and at the end of this life he will go back home, back to Godhead, and not take birth again. And what happened? He got kidnapped. You remember that story? Very amazing story actually. And you know, it's Purana, it's history. So there were some dacoits who were worshipping goddess Kali. You spoke about Kali. You always speak about Kali. Whenever I meet you, you mention Kali.
No, I speak about Radharani.
Okay. So Kali is the, you know, we worship God, but then there is also different demigods, we call them, or goddesses which control material world, etc. So Kali is the goddess which controls the material world. And these dacoits, usually materialistic people, they don't worship Krishna, but they worship Kali because they want material happiness. So they, by worshipping Kali, they can get that. And one prominent worship is by sacrificing human beings. Whoa. Yes, so that was there. They would worship human beings, but what happened? the human which was meant to be sacrificed somehow disappeared and ran away. And the dacoits, they were looking for some human being which they can sacrifice. And they came across Damodar, who was like behaving like a dumb madman. And so they forcibly arrested him and brought him to the place of sacrifice. And Damodar, he didn't protest. He was actually, they put him in a certain, I'm not sure if it's what we usually know from the Middle Ages, where you put in a wooden structure and then they would chop off your head. It's a little bit... I'm not agitating anyone today, especially Linda. But that's apparently what they wanted to do. And Bharat, he didn't protest. He was just tolerating and accepting that. And how is it possible? He knew that now he's going to be killed, they would chop off his head, but he didn't protest. Not a millimeter. He would, make any gesture of protest. He was just accepting. And we understand this is not possible for somebody who is in the duality. If you're in the duality, life is nice because then you can enjoy, and death is bad because then you cannot enjoy. And that's the ultimate duality, to be alive or to be dead. But he didn't even protest at that time. And why is that? Because he was so deeply absorbed in his spiritual reality of being an eternal servant, an eternal soul, who is a servant of God, and being intimately connected with God. And this kind of happiness is called Ananda. Ananda means it's never ending. It's unlimited in quantity, and you cannot measure it with material means what this kind of happiness actually means. Anandam Buddhivardhanam, and it's always increasing. It's not static, but it's dynamic. Spiritual happiness is always increasing eternally. It's getting more and more and more and more. And just to finish the lecture, Prabhupada, he's advising us in this purport that instead of following Bharat Maharaj's example and going to the forest and practicing austerities and becoming almost free of dualities, but then again taking birth as some animal and having to take birth again and then actually coming to that stage, he's saying you should simply practice Bhakti Yoga. And why does he say that? Because he's saying in the purport, going to the forest and only eating some simple roots, seeds, flowers and leaves, etc., and bathing in the ice-cold water without the shelter, dressing in very simple clothes, these are very, very austere practices. In this age it is very difficult to leave home and go to the forest or the Himalayas. Indeed, it is almost impossible. And then later on he says, such acts of renunciation are not possible in this age. So first he's saying it is very difficult, then he's saying it is almost impossible, and then he's saying it's not possible. So that's the conclusion, it's not possible. And that's why we should take to Bhakti Yoga. And what is the process of Bhakti Yoga? There's many aspects, but what we have been given as the very essence of Bhakti Yoga, maybe first we have to explain what means Bhakti Yoga. So yoga means to connect to that source of happiness, to the Absolute, to Krishna. And Bhakti means true devotion. And Bhakti Yoga has different processes, but the very essence which we have been given in this age is chanting. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And we sometimes are a little bit, we don't have so much faith because it seems too easy. Here we hear about persons who go to the forest and they tolerate all kinds of difficult situations. And now we just can chant Hare Krishna. It's so easy, chanting Hare Krishna. It's actually not so easy. And why is it so powerful? Because the traditional way of going to the forest at some stage is a very gradual progress. It's connected with the social system in India, which is called Varnashram Dharma, where you go through different stages in life. And this system is actually connected to the idea that somebody takes birth again and again and again. So Varnashram Dharma, the idea was that maybe you don't reach perfection in one life, but you do it over many, many, many lifetimes. Meaning they had real faith that they will take birth again. Not only faith, but they actually understood that I'm a spirit soul and will take birth again. So they go from one stage to the other, life after life after life, and at one point they will be so advanced that they can fully renounce and are fully developed spiritually. They have reconnected themselves with God. But Prabhupada is saying it's not possible for us in this age. And that process also we can see, it starts by taking austerity on the bodily platform, and in this way by renouncing sense gratification, then one can elevate slowly, then the mind gets purified, and if the mind gets purified, the intelligence gets purified, and so on, and eventually one understands I'm not this material body, but I'm actually a spirit soul, and happiness is within myself. But Bhakti Yoga, and especially the chanting of the holy name, it actually goes to the other side, almost. Because chanting means we are constantly reminding ourselves and praying that I'm a servant of Krishna. I'm a spirit soul, and my duty is to please God, to please Krishna. And that is the direct way. Instead of renouncing so many things, we just jump to the source of material conditioning and just chant. And by chanting, what happens? Our false conception of who we are and what the world is, it disappears. And then by doing that, slowly we also lose taste for sense gratification. We lose taste for mental speculation. And especially we lose that urge to always be in the center, to establish ourselves as the center of all activities. And so it's a simple process, but it's at the same time also difficult. Because when we chant, what's happening is our mind is constantly talking about the past, talking about the future, shochati, kankshati, lamenting and desiring. Constantly, the mind is always going back and forth in the future and in the past. It's never in the present. And that is the austerity. And even though it's so simple, it is so difficult. And many devotees, they fail to actually properly practice that simple thing. And it's because we don't have faith and we don't understand how powerful the chanting is. That if I have faith, let me just sit down once a day and for 2 hours chant and listen and pray, and in this way remind myself that I'm not this body, I'm a spirit soul. So just to conclude, we spoke about these teachings of the Vedic scriptures, how we learn that this material world is a place of misery because we have a material body with senses, and we try to experience happiness by using the senses. And that we have to reconnect to the source of real happiness, which is eternal, and this is God, it's Krishna, and we do that by yoga. And the most recommended practice of yoga in this age is Bhakti Yoga, and the essence of that Bhakti Yoga is chanting, which completely cleanses our false conception of who we are and what this world is and who God is. And in this way all other things, all other problems will get solved directly. Any questions? Anything, maybe some terms which were not clear? Because I know you're taking notes. Or anyone else has any comments? Krishna Prema Prabhu, you want to?
I think for now, there are lots of words I don't understand.
Okay.
When you hear them, you can't tell how they're pronounced. But that's okay. Maybe I can talk to you later about it.
Yeah, sure. Yes, Deva Shri Radha Prabhuji.
Just in relation to this point of duality, and it's probably something we've heard before, but then the nature of the soul is to be happy, and that's why we see in the material world we are constantly hankering for happiness. But then, like we discussed, the material world is known as Dukkhalayam and Ashashvatam. It's like a hospital where we are suffering. And I remember this example from His Holiness Bhakti Char Maharaj. And maybe I will ask you, like if you look at your little finger and you think, in how many ways can you give happiness to your little finger? Rasheshwari, how? You can massage it. You can, yes, you can paint it. So there are these, you can massage it, you can paint it, and you can do a manicure or whatever. So these are the ways you can give happiness. And now I ask you, what are the ways in which you can give pain to this little finger?
You can cut it, you can break it, you can burn it.
Yeah. So if you really see if you weigh the way in which you can give pain is much more than the way you can give happiness to the little finger. And that is indicative of the fact that that's our state in the material world. Because we are hankering for happiness, we are thirsty for happiness, but then we are in the wrong place. We are in a place of suffering. And even if we try very, very hard, and that's what the modern civilization is doing, trying desperately hard to be happy, but we will never be happy because we are in the wrong place. And therefore, it is important to go back to the right place, which is the spiritual world. And that's what we are trying actually in the Krishna consciousness movement, to go back and connect with God. And if you see, that's the difference between what we call quote-unquote material life and spiritual life. What does spiritual life mean? That you lead a life with God in the center. Because at the end of the day, this spiritual planet that we talk about, we were kids of God. I think this is a very common notion we all are aware of. And in the material world, I am the center. And if I am meant to suffer, and if I am the center of things, what will I get? I'll only get suffering. But then if you think of it, for example, there is an electrical cable. And if you touch the electrical cable, what do you get? If you touch an electrical cable?
Flash.
Yeah, a shock.
A shock.
And similarly, if you get in touch with God, who is eternally happy, what will you get?
A flash.
A happiness. So if you really connect with the source of happiness,
ecstatic. That's it. Ecstatic enjoyment.
Yes, in plain terms, it's happiness, right? So if you really connect with the source of happiness, that's why we stress on the connection with God. If you really connect with God, that will really give us happiness. And it really ties in well with your last point about the holy name. And that's why we may think that why do we need to chant? It's actually a connection. Maybe it's a nice point for Linda. You may be thinking like it's sectarian or whatever. But this chanting of the holy name, it's called a mantra. Man means the mind and tra means to conquer. And this chanting of the holy name actually establishes our connection with God. And if we connect ourselves to the source of happiness, then what we are trying so hard for in this material world, it will be easily fulfilled. So they're trying to come back to your last point, that how chanting of the holy name is so important. And therefore in this Krishna consciousness movement, whatever we do, it's actually focused on this point of chanting the Hare Krishna mantra. So just wanted to share that.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Any other points? Yes.
Or word.
Yes.
Thank you, Prabhu. I enjoyed the lecture.
Hare Krishna. Thank you. So thank you all for being present, and thank you especially for coming. The end. Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada, all glories to Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam, and all glories to the assembled devotees. Panchakalpa Tarubhascha Kripasimhavevacha.
Damodar Prasad.
Nur schreiben. Oh, da müsst ihr mal sagen, wie das ist.
Ja, das schon
Still that night? Okay.
I always talk and sing. Lord Krishna, das ist Krishna.
Das ist jemand, der auf der Matte der Welt
Und das ist ja wie der andere. Das ist ja klar. Das ist hinten dran. Jetzt sind halt relevant. Ganz interessant. Genau, absolut.
practice.
Okay, I'm gonna go
Yeah.
and do my other ritualistic activity like eating prasadam, honoring prasadam, prasadam.
Nice.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. I like this already. I like this already.
You sing Abhishek tomorrow. Should I sing here?
That's too low. You should sing at least in the middle so that the crowd don't start first. Hare Hare. Any lights?
Hare Hare